Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's event, Careers in AI. I'm not Jennifer Regala. I'm so sorry. I'm Mary Beth Barilla, Program Director for the Society for Scholarly Publishing. Jennifer, our host, was not able to get her sound working this morning. Today's event is the first in SSP's Professional Development Spotlight Series and is brought to you by SSP's Washington, D.C. Regional Committee, co-chaired by Paige Wooden and Jennifer. Before we get started, I have just a few housekeeping items to review. This discussion will be recorded. Your phone will be muted automatically in consideration of our speakers and your fellow participants. Please use the Q&A feature to send questions to the panelists. The chat feature is also available if you just want to say hello to panelists or other attendees or to flag any technical problems you might experience. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to a member of the DC committee, Ginny Pittman.
Thanks, Mary Beth. Excited to be here. Thank you for joining us. So we have 4 speakers today. I'm really excited to introduce Cece Shahan, Neil Blair Christensen, John Malone, and Rick Misra. So the nice thing about the 4 people that will be speaking is they represent AI and publishing in different settings. So Cece, you are the Director of Scientific Outreach at the American Society for Investigative Pathology. Neil, I know you're the Director of Partnership Solutions at Research Square. John, I know you're an Assistant Director at the Career Coach at University of Maryland. And Rick, I know you're a Principal Product Manager at Elsevier. And all of these speakers are going to start by telling themselves a little bit, telling everyone on the call a little bit about their career path. So we're fortunate they're sharing their stories here. And they're going to talk about their interest in AI. And then we're going to go to, once everyone has had a chance to speak, we're going to go to a Q&A, and people can place their questions in the Q&A portion, or they can put them in the chat. Fortunately, Paul is on the call, and he is also going to be helping us monitor all the questions and make sure that we get through all the questions for all the speakers, because we have a short amount of time. We'll be ending this at 12 today, US Eastern Time. So I'm going to start off by turning it over to Cece. Over to you.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. And thank you so much for this opportunity to talk about my career path. Essentially, I'm a geek. I have always been passionate about science. So I did a master's in biotech, I did a PhD in molecular biology, and did a short postdoc at the NIH. Though I hated writing, both my thesis for my master's and my PhD, I somehow, I don't know, started enjoying scientific writing, editing, and reviewing. And it's at that point that I decided to pivot into scholarly communications. Thankfully for me, the transition was quick and it was rather seamless. In my new role as scientific editor for at the American Society for Investigative Pathology, or ASIP, for 2 of the journals, I could really leverage my skills that I had accrued over the years. So knowledge of the various disciplines of science, ability to communicate science to diverse audiences, and I guess the project management skills, trying to manage different projects as a math scientist. And so I could multitask, reach the deadlines. And most importantly, what I loved was being able to explore my newfound passion for scholarly communications. So now for a little over 2 years, I've been serving as Director of Scientific Outreach at ASIP. And this new role has definitely challenged me a lot, and in a good way, because it has dictated my path forward. So my real interaction with AI really began 2 years ago in 2019, when we expanded the scope of one of our journals to include a topic category on AI and computational pathobiology. And I knew nothing about it. So I took it upon myself to go to AI-based conferences and learn about AI in health and pharma, essentially. And during the course of these events, I realized the gap in the ethical implementation and deployment of AI in the healthcare ecosystem. And since last year, pretty much, I have been engaging with in this space with global leaders in various capacities. So I'm now a leader in Women in AI Ethics Collective and an expert at AI Policy Exchange.
Thanks, Cece. Okay, well, we're going to turn now over to Neil, who is Director of Partnership Solutions at Research Square.
Hey, thank you. And like Cece, thank you for inviting me here today. It's good to be here. So I probably have I have a couple of disclosures, right? The first is that I'm not a developer. I took a 1-month course in Python just to sort of get some basic appreciation of the complexity of some of this stuff, but I couldn't code if my life depended on it at all. So my contribution here is related to the business development and sales aspect. The second one is probably around sort of the definition of AI. There are so many conversations or events I go to where people get bent out of shape over trying to define exactly what AI is. And while it's important, I tend to see like a very large spectrum, right? From something that is so simple that it's a stretch to say that there's anything intelligent going on, to things that are so complex that it's completely impossible to understand what is really going on. So just two pieces of context there. So yesterday, when I started thinking about, well, what am I going to talk about today, and how did this all get started? I think maybe my interest in sort of the application of technology, not necessarily as AI, started back when I was at university, and I did a thesis on the topic of Inuit in cyberspace, right, which was my culmination of Greenlandic and Arctic studies. And for anyone interested, that turned into a book, which 18 years later still hasn't sold out of the 800 copies that were sold. And that probably was the reason I ended up in publishing. I then tried to take my interest in the direction of thinking, maybe I could do a research project around network distance education in the Arctic, but of course I couldn't find anyone that would fund it. And then I ended up in publishing instead, which was probably better for me anyway. And then over the years, I just always seemed to gravitate towards part of the business that had to do with the application of technology and business development, right? With Blackwell, Wiley, NPG, UC Press. And then a few years back, I ended up with this text intelligence startup called Unsilo. And then about 6 months ago, I arrived at Research Square Company, where I am today. And for those who don't know, Research Square Company sort of consists of two things. One is the author services arm around American Journal Experts. And then there's a preprint platform called Research Square. So in the context of AI, what attracted me and maybe brought me eventually to Research Square Company was that, unbeknown to probably quite a few people, this company has and is developing and deploying AI solutions, right? And they include things like automated language scoring, automated editing solutions that have actually been in use within the company for the past couple of years and generated, $9 million and counting on the bottom line. So here's a company that's actually using these. And then what attracted me particularly was, of course, now I have an opportunity to go out and sell these types of capabilities, right, to other providers in this space, publishers, APIs, researchers as software as a service solution, their institutions, not just me, but together with my colleagues. I think Lindsay is on the call. And I aimed precisely towards something like this, right? Because I felt that strategically, there are some things that are coming together, right? The intersection of AI, OA, preprints, author services. Like for me, things that are critically important sort of in the current evolution of our industry. So then I would say, well, if I'm not a developer and I don't really care about the exact definition of AI, why is it something that I find important or that I think we should take professional interest in? And I assume a lot of folks on the call will feel like that, right? That's why you're here today. So I have like 3 thoughts, and in no order of priority for why I think we should take interest in AI in scholarly publishing. Right? You always need like 3 reasons. Maybe it's 2, maybe it's 5, but I'm just sort of come up with 3 here. So the first one is something like this, right? Like, maybe if you're a bit like me, right? So I often think, what if I had just bought $10 worth of Bitcoin in 2010, right? At 8 cents per Bitcoin, then I would have like something in the region of $5 to $6 million worth of Bitcoin today, right? Or when I knew that Amazon was disrupting my industry, and it was still irresistible to me as a customer, and the customer experience was second to none, why didn't I buy more shares, right? Or when I knew that electric cars were probably going to become a thing, why didn't I invest in Tesla earlier? Or now when I look out the window, right, and I can see all these autonomous development vehicles driving around my neighborhood in San Francisco every day, what am I really doing with that information? So, I may have failed at converting some of that hindsight into early retirement, right? But at least for professional satisfaction, I'm convinced that AI will have a significant impact on how we attract, produce, and sell information, right? For me, there's just no way around it. And maybe I don't exit and become a gazillionaire from that, but professionally, it's just super satisfying to me to be involved with trying to figure out how do we turn a business into this. The second thing is just, a lot of people will say, well, AI, is that really a thing in scholarly publishing industry? Well, try and take a step back and think about how much AI is involved in our lives today, right? Credit scores, car computing, air travel, rideshare pricing, search, fraud prevention, personal assistance, and all that stuff, right? So outside of publishing, our lives are just so seriously entwined with AI, and often we don't even think about it, right? Heck, many of the researchers whose findings and studies we publish use AI, right? Or computational models to do a lot of their research. So I just cannot imagine a future scholarly publishing, like an information industry, that wouldn't make serious use of AI. And that leads to my third and final, I'll wrap this up, right? Reason. And I have this quote, and apologies if you've heard it before, but it's from a person called Pedro Domingos, who's written a book, The Master Algorithm, that I think is a good read. And he says that a frequently heard objection is that data can't replace human intuition. But in fact, it's the other way around, right? Human intuition can't replace data. Let's just think about that. Human intuition can't replace data. So if we translate that into scholarly publishing, right, we're in an industry that at its very core DNA revolves around generating, analyzing, filtering data. And we know that data is growing exponentially because we're so good at doing what we do, and because there are all these other dynamics that are just growing content. So I'll wrap it up, right? I think it's critical that we develop AI to help us optimize the type of value that we provide to our customers, right? So despite me being coding illiterate, and not really being worried about the precise definition of AI, right? That's why I'm so interested in business development of solutions that leverage AI in our industry. I'll pause there.
Awesome. Thanks, Neil. I appreciate it. So I'm going to turn it over to John Malone, who is at University of Maryland.
Hello, everybody. Like CC, I feel like I'm pretty much a geek. And Neil, I feel your pain when it comes to having scholarly publications that are still on the shelf, and being from a business development background. My earliest part of my career was in the college textbook business. And my first claim to fame was I created, using Lotus 123 and a 5¼ inch floppy drive on a portable computer that was the size of a Singer sewing machine, a prototype of a CRM, right? And using my intuition, I was realizing that I had all these books to sell, and I was selling them at Berkeley and Stanford and, all over the place. And I thought the easiest sell was to find somebody who did their PhD or who studied under the author or who was a mentor to the author of the book I was selling. And I'd start there. And so I started typing in, creating these lists, and it was a manual process, but my sales started going up. And then one of my faculty mentors at Berkeley said, "Hey, how'd you like to have an access to the internet?" And they gave me a student account, which got me onto Archie and to, all of these listservs. And so I just started sending out these queries saying, so-and-so from Brown University just published a book on, American government. Does anybody know so-and-so? And people would respond. And then I said, oh, I can build a form to capture this information. And then I could email these people, when the book was ready for publication, and ask them for reviews. Anyways, I was a sales rep for Prentice Hall with a quota of $200,000 a year. And in 1 year, I sold $2 million worth of books. And from that point forward, I moved into marketing and business development, and ultimately to creating my own consulting firm. But for more than half of my career, the challenge was, how do we capture data that we can then use as part of our strategy to incrementally, add product features or understand problems in our distribution system, or, to sell to the right customers. And so half of the problem was, what is the data we need? And then the other half of the problem was, now that we've got this list of who our best customers are, how do we get the salespeople to call those people and to follow up with them and put them into a funnel and work that funnel down, right? Well, fast forward, I'm comfortably into my consulting career, and I'm realizing the problem is no longer creating data, it's keeping up with data. And everyone was talking about the cloud and big data, and I was hiring people to work for me on consulting projects who were saying things that I just couldn't understand, but I was making money off of them. And I ultimately realized I had to go back to grad school. And so I went to grad school, got a master's in information systems, and was taking a machine learning class. And it blew my mind. The first example was using scholarly publications and using natural language processing to create new indexes and new libraries of all of the previously published works based on your own, need, right? So we could create data products based on existing data that was categorized for other purposes by other people for other reasons. And my mind was just blown that, like, wow, we could do that. But it still started with, what is the information we need? How are we going to use it? And then I started learning about AI. And it's this automated process of accelerating the decision-making, right? It's not build it, stop, evaluate. It's, how does this thing keep going? How does it work at scale? How does it make incremental decisions that creates new data and new insight that can be put into a workflow, and at the same time generate new insights so that we are not waiting and slowing the process down to have sales meetings and things like that. It's building, it's accelerating on itself. So I've just become fascinated by the power of AI to completely accelerate our ability to make change happen and to create insights that we were in the Stone Ages with chisels not too long ago. So I'm just fascinated about it. And so I coach students who are in specialty master's programs right now, trying to move into careers in data science using AI. And it is just so exciting to be kind of part of this conversation of people making career choices and kind of moving into this new frontier, which it's a wild ride. So I'll leave it there and pass it on to the next person.
Sure. So Rick, you're from Elsevier. Why don't you talk about how you landed in AI and your career path?
Sure. So I'll touch on a lot of the same themes I think that CC, Neil, and John have touched on already. My perspective comes, so I did my PhD in neuroscience. I went on to do a postdoctoral fellowship. While I was there, I was approached by my PI to look into something that he was collaborating with with Elsevier, which was a three-dimensional brain atlas. It was called Brain Navigator. So that's actually how I kind of meandered my way into the publishing world, was that I thought I was going to take the classic academic path. I was going to go be a professor somewhere. And I got really engaged in this process. I enjoyed kind of the product side of development. So that might be a slightly different perspective that I'll bring here, which is very customer focused. I was a customer. I was therefore considered to some degree a domain expert in a specific space and understood the kind of pain points that researchers and end users were facing in trying to engage with the literature. And flash forward a couple of years later, I moved into a group where we had compiled a group of domain experts and tried to look at understanding that end user need, like in very, very deep detail. Could we identify all of these pain points? Could we formulate a mechanism by which we could tackle the types of problems that people face with trying to understand information? We kind of broke it down into different units. The unit that I took was kind of foundational knowledge. There's a lot of multidisciplinary work going on. People don't always know the space that they're getting into these days, especially when you have this kind of cross-disciplinary interaction. And so could I develop a way to build out foundational knowledge on a particular topic, but at the right level that provided enough detail for people? And so, like a lot of these things, I found my way into AI largely by trying to solve a problem. The problem we were trying to solve first was one that we were, to some degree, trying to avoid creating over complexity, right, in the process. So we started simple. We started looking at what's the type of information that I would need to use to solve this? How would I break it down or template that information? And then largely it became, okay, we started drawing up these things. It turned into a project that we call the kind of Science Direct topic pages. But as we started building these out and drawing out templates and kind of sketching these things out, the idea was, is there a way to scale this? Can you take information, much like John was referring to, that's been used for one purpose? We've been constrained in a lot of ways by the kind of print world. And we've carried that forward in terms of the format of the journal or the format of the book even. And then the question was, can you pivot that information to solve somebody's unique problem? So I'm looking for a particular topic. I want a certain set of information around that topic. Can I pivot information? Can I extract it from multiple places and aggregate that information onto a page to solve a simple problem or a unit of information that somebody's looking for? And so the idea was, can we use natural language processing to identify those units, can we use this template and understand? So one step beyond identifying entities or concepts in a paper is, can you understand some of the meaning? Can you segment out so that you're not getting the same type of information multiple times on a page, but that can you kind of pivot that information so that you're getting an array of different types of information that'll give somebody more breadth on a particular topic. So that's kind of what got me interested in AI. We use those techniques, and we started small, and we started in the domain we understood. So all of us in that group were neuroscientists, so we started there. The beauty of starting there was that it was quite multidisciplinary itself. It's not a real field in a sense, right? It's an aggregation of multiple fields. And from there, we scaled it to 20 different domains. We built a system that could generate these pages on the fly, and obviously could be scaled. The more you expand these taxonomies, for example, the deeper and richer the information on those pages. And I found that really compelling. And I think that kind of sits so that I'm not a data scientist. I sit outside of that space, but I came to it from the side, really trying to solve a problem. I think a lot of us have similar problems that we can identify in our areas of expertise, and we can leverage these techniques, even if you're not the one building the technique, to solve those types of problems. And there's a lot of them out there.
That's great. Thanks. Again, Rick, thank you for that insight and sharing your career stories, and to all of our speakers. We're really going to turn it over to a Q&A for everyone on the call. I think there was one question that's already been posted in the chat. Paul, I'll hand it over to you.
Yes. So Josephine asks, how do you think artificial intelligence will affect the work of copy editing in addition to automations in reference management? So I think it's one of these questions of how much of people's jobs are going to be automated in the future.
Cece, do you want to start, or Neil? I think you.
Okay. So thank you for that opportunity, Neil. And this is really great hearing everyone's background, and where they're coming from. And excellent question. To sort of simplify how we are using AI in the scholarly publishing field as of now, I believe our integration of AI is mostly limited to RPA, or robotic process automation, largely, right? So of course, there would be improvements in efficiencies for all the jobs that folks are doing in the editorial offices. In the specific context of copy editing, like the attendee asked about reference management, yes, that has happened. There are several platforms, and I know I'm aware of Elsevier's platform that uses now Proof Central for managing the proofs, and it's pretty intuitive in the way it sort of mimics Microsoft Word to catch, different grammatical errors or prompt things. What would Microsoft do? And it's much easier to annotate as compared to the PDF proofs that we've been used to for several years or forever. So I want to say that the processes may be limited to RPA for the time being. I know, and I think most of you will be familiar with IBM Watson, which was trying to extract a lot of information from dense scientific text, to make sense of it, to help, clinical trial management and expedite interactions, and really like trying to get good information out for folks, clinicians who did not have the time to read so many publications that were flooding the literature. For example, what's happening in COVID-19, in the case of COVID-19 right now, because there's so many preprint, print, peer-reviewed publications out there. So what do you trust, what you don't? But I think that knowledge is so complex, and unfortunately, the AI is not so well developed as of now to sort of take over some of the major tasks that a human can do, because AI is limited by the data sets and what it's trained upon. And you have to really build this hugely huge data sets that have all the parameters that the AI can actually leverage to make sense out of it. So we're far from there. And unfortunately, IBM Watson was shut down because of various incapabilities. So I would say the jobs are definitely secure. If anything, if you are in a traditional scholarly publishing sort of job, there will be more opportunities for you to continue doing your roles the way you are. Like I just did a Google search yesterday just to look for some artificial intelligence titles, and there was a list of 50 journals that popped up. I'm sure that number's gonna more than double in the next couple of years. So all the traditional jobs are going to stay. AI is gonna take over certain processes of automation, at least in the next 5 to 10 years, that will increase efficiencies in the offices for people to critically and strategically think. So how they can reach their readership better, serve them better, perhaps, improve upon the turnaround times to disseminate science sooner. So that would be my take on it. Over to you, Neil.
Yeah, I just quickly add. So I mentioned in the intro piece, right, that we've developed at Research Square Company, American Journal Experts, we've developed this automated editing solution. And I think, so very briefly, what it does is it helps us with the first pass of submissions that we receive for editing. Now, mind you, the types of submissions we receive for editing, right, are submissions that need a lot of help, versus what you would maybe see after acceptance, at a journal. So the lift that's needed is maybe different. But what we've been able to do there is roughly doubling our capacity for editing in the last 2.5, 3 years. No one has lost a job over that. What it has enabled us to do is to keep up with the growth of demand, right? Because there's so much that needs to be edited. But we also know that there isn't enough money in the world to throughput that information in the same way or at the same cost levels as we've traditionally been able to do, right? We can't hire our way out of meeting growth output, right? It's impossible. So the way we've used it is to sort of supplement our capability. And you can think of it as maybe supercharging the capabilities of our editors, right? So now it means that there are many things that they did before that is now being solved by some automation, and it frees up their time to do other things. And I can also say that the output that you get, right, this first pass of a track changes document, we are not at a stage where someone could take that document and just say, it's done, it's copy edited, just publish it the way it is, right? That's not where we're at. It still requires someone to look through that and make some determinations on the different suggestions, right? A machine is super smart at doing some things, but they're statistically, out of all those changes that are being suggested, there's always going to be some changes where someone could go in and say, you know what? I understand why you made that suggestion, dear machine, but I'm going to ignore it for the following reasons, right? So the human context is still super important. I'm not saying that one day the machine isn't good enough, because it continues to get better. But where we are right now, the output is something that still needs, what I say, human intervention. Yeah.
Neil, thank you, because I think when I was reading some of the reports that have been out about AI and publishing, it was very clear that every one of the reports, there was one from Frankfurt Book Fair, I think, and Goldfinch, and they made a specific effort to say, AI is going to help us, in terms of, in the value chain, but publishing is a people's business. We're always going to need people. And in fact, in this area, I think we're going to need more people that have the skills to understand how to solve problems using AI. So I think what you're saying is completely on point. So I am going to ask John to comment in terms of not specific to the copy editing question, but John, if you could talk a little bit about the people in the data science program, where they're going, where you see kind of their, where their trajectory is, and if you see some of them going into the publishing world, because I know the publishing world needs them. So I'm going to turn it over to you, John.
Well, thank you. Yeah, so what's really interesting about this, about what both Cece and Neil have said, is that what is really, really critical, what's kind of keeping AI at that first pass robotic process automation level, is the limitation on AI is domain knowledge. You have specialized language, you have specialized context that is just really hard to automate. And so my students, who are early career professionals for the most part, are going into the field of AI more on the how do we build the model stage and how do we, do the coding stage. But they have to go into environments where there is some layer of strategy, which is kind of visionary, saying we need to understand, can we, where's our pain point? We can't hire our way out of this, like Neil said. So what is that first pass? What is that layer that can complement what we have in our, adding value to what we do, that people with these Python skills and, NLP skills can really help us supplement. And they are hoping to be an environment where they will learn that domain knowledge so that they can build better and better models.
Thanks, John. Paul, it looks like we've got a couple more questions.
Yes, we actually have 4 questions. So John has just actually more or less answered one of them, which was, as AI is still an embryonic field, how important is it to get a professional qualification in AI to work in the publishing industry on this topic? So I'm not sure if anybody wants to tackle that before I go on to the next batch.
I'll just jump on that last part of the question, which is, if you're already in, the field, just supplementing with some LinkedIn Learning or some, online courses about natural language processing, robotic process automation, to get a sense of, where that fits, I think would be great, because the most valuable piece is that practical domain knowledge about what is the bottleneck, what is slowing down the delivery of a higher quality product.
I agree.
then-
I think, sorry.
No, after you.
I was going to say, I mean, kind of finding your niche, kind of the area of expertise that you already have, and then adding a layer on top of that. So I don't think you necessarily need a certificate per se, but just a level of curiosity to figure out, how do you evolve what you're doing? Can you leverage any of these capabilities to do something either more efficiently or add something at scale to what you're doing? I mean, I think you don't need to have a certificate. You just have to have a level of curiosity, and then find out how willing your institution is in kind of incorporating those types of things into the work that you're doing.
Terrific. Thanks. Thanks to you both. Paul, let's get through some of these questions. I know that there's one in the chat too.
Yep. So the next 2 are sort of semi-connected. So Natalie asks, she's a commissioning editor for economics textbooks. Can you see applications of AI in the student textbook space? I appreciate that it's early days to bring this up. And then the second one, which is again related to it, is all about the quality of the data. The core of good AI and machine learning is good data. It's difficult to make the researching community provide good and uniform data, as simple as writing the author name in a uniform format. How do we tackle getting good data from the source? So Ginny, who are you going to pick to go first?
Well, who would like to go? I want to tackle, I think, I from a perspective of, the development, I guess maybe Neil, if you want to talk about this first.
So the development is which of the questions is that?
Sure. In terms of, like Natalie had asked about applications of AI in the student textbook space.
It's
So
a good
really
question.
in terms.
Yeah, I'd say it's a good question. The world is our oyster. It's difficult to. I mean, so there's some practical things, and I can say that, you know, on our end, we have a lot of conversations now, and some of them are with books publishers. Of course, the use cases that they're looking at is maybe is influenced by what's available on the shelf, rather than what is it that a books publisher or a textbooks publisher would want to do. What are they solving for? Yeah, so I think sometimes there's some of the challenges with some of these technologies become, sometimes it's sort of like you know, technology chasing a use case. Well, we happen to have this. Can it be used for something, right? And really, what needs to, that's cool, and sometimes that works, right? But what really needs to happen is thinking clearly about understanding who we are selling, providing a service to as a textbook publisher, and identifying what are the things that can provide lift, and then go out and saying, this is the solution we need to address this issue, right? So that's one way of thinking about it. But in the use case that I just mentioned, I mean, what we're being approached by textbook publishers or publishers for is very much around sort of the composition, right? Because it's the margins on publishing books and textbooks today, right? They're if not going down, they're not going up, and it's a very competitive market. So publishers are looking to inch out margins wherever they can there, right? And the thing that we have that addresses some of that is in the, you know, in the editing, the composition of these things, where we can take these very dense objects and help slim down some of the processing of the copy editing on them. Doesn't mean there aren't things that you could imagine AI could help with, especially sort of just in the learning experience, right? But that's more like a learning management system thing. You know, we have all this information. What are the things that we can do to identify where students are, you know, statistically tend to struggle, and serve information to them at the right point, the right time in that learning experience. But that's sort of outside of the scope of what I work on. But I think there has to be something there, right? And it's something we see in other industries, but not necessarily in ours.
So Neil, you're kind of talking about the adaptive learning aspect.
Oh, yeah, you said it much better. That's what I should have said. Yes.
And can I just add a couple of things to what Neil just said?
Thank you.
I completely agree. And the fact that, you know, we don't have to use AI to do something. We have to identify the problem and see if your problem can be addressed by AI. So, you know, it's two different things. So go about solving the problem, not about seeing how you can integrate a new technology that may be available and working for some other thing. And secondly, how do you leverage in school textbooks? So it sort of could be similar to what we are doing in other virtual learning courses, for example, right? So if you take a Coursera course, it'll tell you how many times how many times majority of students have revisited a particular section, for example. So from that perspective, if it's an ebook and students are using it or children are using it on a platform that can track their engagement on particular parts of the book, so it can help the publisher or the author identify the needs of the students or children or what speaks to them, and to further expand on those titles, for example, for marketing purposes. But then again, there are the ethical constraints about what are the kids looking for? What more are you pushing in their direction by modulating content to appeal to them based on what's happening? So I think, again, it goes back to AI not doing everything on its own, but human intervention to see what we use AI and to enable solutions for our problems.
Thanks, Cece. Paul, I think we have a bunch of other questions to get through before.
Yes. So there's actually two, again, slightly related. Paige asks, have you thought about AI in scholarly publishing in the context of the growing concerns about AI in general, i.e. political polarization or privacy issues with advertising the social media on the web in general? And I think Tony's question also touches on this. How much historical bias is being considered when using AI to develop content? Are there techniques to help limit historical bias?
That's actually a really good point. Cece, I'm going to turn to you first for that one, because I know you've looked very closely at the ethics of AI.
Yes, and that is a concern, and I sort of want to address Paige's question. I think there was an anonymous attendees about the data sets, right? So the capability of all AI-based models are limited by the data sets that we are using, right? So you cannot make a machine perform any better than what you're feeding it. So going back to what data we can provide, so that's where the expertise of everyone in the scholarly publishing domain comes into being. Not having the technical background, but at least understanding broadly what needs to be done, what needs to be addressed, the concerns that are plaguing our society right now of socioeconomic disparities, for example, or discrimination and bias that is ingrained, in our personalities over the years. So it becomes very evident that every single stakeholder in the scholarly publications landscape starts speaking out about biased data sets, the things that should be excluded from training an AI model. So the idea would be to build inclusive data sets, to eliminate the black box from the AI, make it more transparent so the users actually understand how the model is working. So they can also comprehend the limitations of the model and hence, the effects of implementing something that is using AI.
Thanks, Cece. Does anyone else on our speaker panel want to address that, the diversity and bias in the data sets?
I think
we've.
Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, go ahead, Neil. I was just going to say, I mean, we've certainly seen that ourselves, right? When you take this pool of content that has been generated for different purposes, and you see the bias that exists within. So the biggest part of building these models has to be ensuring data integrity. You spend the most time cleaning up that data, making sure as best as you can, but things always slip in. There's classic tales on the web about how these things have failed utterly because of the implicit bias of the people who are tasked with either generating the data or cleaning the data, and those things can leak in to the outcomes. These things are just pattern recognition systems. They may find very complex patterns, but the pattern is only the pattern that you fed in. The cliche is garbage in, garbage out. So there has to be an effort towards ensuring clean data. But back to that question before around the fact that a lot of what we try to do is collect data from users, and how you ask those questions. And if they're relatively vague or there's not a clear outcome in terms of what you're asking, you can get diversity in the way people present the information to you. And that becomes a difficult piece to parse. So there also has to be some upfront approaches in terms of ensuring that you constrain the information you're asking for in the right ways to get an answer or get a set of data that serves your purpose, and that you can provide reasonable action on based on how it's conformed.
That's great.
I completely agree. And and I think there's something to be stressed there, right? There are sometimes the very valid, right, and we have to think about these, but somewhat theoretical concerns about like technology or any issue in our lives, right, where we can, you know, spend some energy on trying to answer, you know, some of these things. Then there are the applied ways of looking at some of these things. So for instance, with the automated editing model that we have, we were aware because of the overarching conversation about being careful about biased AI, right? In tempering the output. So on a practical level, we've spent quite a lot of energy beyond sort of getting clean data in and making sure that this neural network is fed as good data as we can generate, to also make sure that the suggestions it makes are conservative and tempered. We don't need to surface all the suggestions it makes, right? So in the application, there are ways of tempering it. The other thing, and I know this is going to be a bit provocative, but that's, you know, sometimes I really wonder, right, when we compare human with machine, when you have a human output, no one questions the reproducibility of the random thinking and serendipity that went into that. Why did this person review these 1,000 references and decide that these 100 are the most? What methodology was behind that, right? But the minute we give it to a machine, we expect like complete transparency in process. And it's not to say that we shouldn't do that, but it's just to say that the idea of using information that somehow came about in a somewhat serendipitous or non-transparent way, you know, is based on a very long human tradition of filtering information. And it doesn't necessarily break the chain, because we have some information in our lives that sort of comes out of a black box. This here is probably like the craziest black box, right? And we're all carrying one.
Thanks, Neil. Paul, I think we have one last question before we need to wrap up. And I think it's in the Q&A.
Yes. So Todoro, I hope I said that right. Previous discussions have proposed the use of AI in predicting publication trends for scientific topics and to pre-screen manuscripts based on those predictions. In 2020, the pandemic changed the publishing landscape completely and continues to do so in 2021. How does this challenge AI-based predictions? How reliable is AI to predict publication trends?
Who wants to take that?
I could very simply say I trust AI, you know, when I have to go on to my next meeting, or, you know, when it tells me it's going to be sunny outside and I can go for a walk. I take a back step when it's sunny outside for just that 10 minutes, you know, it just rains like crazy and then it's sunny back again. So that's the level of AI predictions to me.
Thanks, Cece.
And I just have two words, somewhat reliable.
Somewhat reliable. All right. Rick, do you want to add to that, or John?
I'll just say, you know, we base a lot of expectations on these things, and they're, again, only as good as the data. And some things can skew, you know, this is an anomaly. And those types of anomalies will skew the results, and that's to be expected, right? And so we have to understand that the information is fluid, it can change, and what you feed into it, you know, if there's not a way to temper the spikes in the information that you're getting, then you won't get something that is maybe as reliable as you're expecting.
Thank you. Thanks to all the speakers. And I think there's a slide coming up. Jen, over to you. Jen, I think you're on mute.
Yes. This has been a day of technical challenges for me, so I apologize to everyone. We're so glad that you were able to join us today. Thank you for participating in today's event on behalf of the SSP DC regional event. Many thanks to our amazing moderator. Jenny, you did a fantastic job, and also our panelists learned so much from each and every one of you, and we appreciate you taking time out of your busy schedules to do this. I think we all learned a lot. Also, thank you to my colleagues on the DC Regional Group for organizing this session. To all of the attendees, we thank you too, and we're so glad that you were able to join us. You'll receive an evaluation via email, and we really do encourage you to provide feedback and to help us to determine topics for future events just like this one in the future. So don't miss the next couple of events on the SSP calendar, including those listed here. Also, while we're here, I just want to ask everyone to please consider a donation to SSP's Generations Fund. I can tell you I myself have donated. I believe so much in SSP's mission and in all of the important work that they do. So I really highly recommend a donation if you're able. The fund provides sustainable funding for SSP's fellowship and mentorship programs through an endowment. And as you know, as SSP says, a community is only as strong as its next generation of leaders. And I don't think we can argue with that. Today's discussion was recorded. All of us will be sent a link to the recording when it's posted on the SSP website. And with that, our session is concluded today. And again, we're very grateful that you were able to join us. Thank you.
Thanks, Jen.
Thanks. Have a great day, everyone.
To all the speakers.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone.